Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Wray, for being here with us today. I want to just ask some questions to follow up on some things that you have previously testified to today, particularly when Mr. Issa was talking to you, and then several other people got in on that exchange just a little bit. One of the things you said, and I'm going to paraphrase part of it, then I'll quote part of it. You said if there's undue political considerations, if the IG finds that there's undue political considerations at play in the original Clinton investigations, then the FBI would have to determine, and then you said how to unring the bell. And I guess my question is multiple there. I mean, what did you mean when you said unring the bell? And let's just start there.
It's hard for me to speculate about what I would do at that point. I think it would depend a lot on the particulars of what the Inspector General found. I would not rule out anything appropriate that would be in response to the Inspector General's findings. Sometimes there may be recommendations that come with the Inspector General's report, in my experience. So that's something we would take into account. It could range from anything from changes to our policies, our structures. It could be personnel decisions that come out of it. There could be follow-up that we need to engage in as a result of things that we learned from the Inspector General's report. So it's hard for me to give kind of an exhaustive list, but those are a few of the kinds of things that I can imagine.
Well, the first two things that you mentioned there were really kind of internal, processes, personnel. Maybe somebody needs to be corrected. Maybe they need to be disciplined. Beyond that, though, I'm wondering if there's additional options that might include even reopening the investigation, taking a harder look, and is that a potential option?
Well, I think what I would say to you there, Congressman, is something that I believe is true really in any situation, which is if we find, for example, new information or new evidence that would cause us to want to reopen an investigation, assuming we don't have a statute of limitations problem or something, that's something we would consider. And likewise, if the information we received from the Inspector General suggested that that's something that would be appropriate, then that's something we would consider.
Okay. And you also indicated that, and is his name Mr. Strzok? I wanted to get the pronunciation right. I've heard it about 5 different ways today. Strzok, is that?
Strzok.
Okay, so Mr. Strzok was reassigned, and you said that wasn't a disciplinary move. It just seems like an odd lateral move. So are you telling us all that that was a lateral move for him?
The individual in question was reassigned away from the Special Counsel investigation to the Human Resources Department. I understand that may sound to some of you like a demotion, but I can assure you that in a 37,000-person organization with a $9 billion budget and offices all around the country and in 80 countries around the world, that I think our Human Resources Department is extremely important, and a lot of what they do is cutting-edge, best practice stuff. So it's a very different kind of assignment, certainly, but that's why I don't consider it disciplinary or a demotion.
Okay, and so with regard to the attorneys that are on the Mueller team, did the FBI vet them at all? And if so, what was the vetting process?
I'm not aware of what vetting may or may not have been done in the staffing of Director Mueller's team. Of course, all FBI agents, when they join, are subject to an excruciatingly detailed background investigation. And then over the course of their trajectory, especially because of their access to classified information, there are sort of re-up investigations that occur over the life of an agent's career. But as far as specific vetting, not sure exactly what you mean by that for purposes.
Well, let's get to the heart of it. I won't mince words. So what we've talked about today is appearance of conflict or bias, and everything from donating rather large sums of money to candidates, some of which have been perhaps even under investigation by the FBI at some point or another. Communication widely critical of this administration, or highly supportive of another administration or candidates that, again, may have been under investigation at some point. What's the process there? Is there an official process that goes into determining whether someone is compromised or has a bias in their investigation? Or is this like in the Department of Justice when we had Attorney General Sessions here? He said, well, we don't have a process. It's up to each attorney to basically decide whether they have a conflict of interest, which isn't the way it is in private sector, just so you know. So I'm wondering what would be your process in determining whether the bias was too great? Because you said earlier that
time of the gentleman has expired.
Thank you.
Director can answer the question.
We don't do political scrubbing of our agents. Of course, a lot of the questions today have gone to prosecutors, which, again, that's not a part that we devote agents and staff to the Special Counsel investigation, but not to the prosecutor side.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and Director Wray, thank you for your time, your patience here in answering all of our questions and your service to our country. It is all very, very much appreciated. You started today, you gave us testimony this morning, a summary, 15 pages describing the programs and priorities of the FBI, of the Bureau. You don't mention in this at all some of the work you've talked about later, which is protecting our elections. And I think, I don't want to put exact words, but you talked about protecting the integrity of our elections, and it's critical to the foundations of our democracy. In fact, election security is national security. However, 2 months ago, Attorney General Sessions, testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee, said that the Department of Justice had not yet taken any actions towards protecting our elections from foreign interference. It would be a gross understatement to say that I was deeply concerned about his remarks. When he came a few weeks later to this committee, I asked him what had been done, and I was astounded at his answer to say we hadn't done anything. But I was grateful that he said he would take action and work with us. I understand that the FBI is making this a priority, that you have created a task force within the FBI. What was it that prompted the development of the task force? What void does that fill? What's its mission, and who are its members?
Well, first off, I think, if I might, I think the fact that the Attorney General didn't mention the efforts that we have underway is simply a reflection of the fact that there's lots and lots and lots of things that happen in a gigantic Justice Department, and some of them, may not have been briefed to him as promptly as we should have. The Attorney General, I know, cares deeply about this issue, and in my view, is a great man and a great public servant. I will say that in the context of foreign influence in our elections, that was prompted in part by our concerns growing out of all of the dust-up with the ICA, that we knew from that, combined with what we saw from talking with some of our foreign partners, that efforts to interfere not just with our elections but other countries' elections is a real thing. We know that was true not just in the last election, but that's something the Russians have tried to do in prior elections, even before the last election.
They've done it before. We have to expect they will do it again.
I think we all expect that. And so our Foreign Influence Task Force is a blend of people from the Counterintelligence Division, the Cyber Division, the Criminal Division, and other parts of the department. A lot of it is work that we were already doing. But I think putting them together in a single task force provides it's a time-honored way to increase the focus, the discipline, the prioritization, the coordination, and it allows us to pursue those concerns with greater vigor and focus.
But if I may, you talked about doing that within the Bureau. Right. You've mentioned coordinating with DHS, but this is a complex issue. It cuts across many agencies. How is the task force working with the other departments, the other agencies, to make sure that we are prepared to protect the integrity of our elections next year?
We have the task force has a variety of contacts with not just DHS. I mentioned them because they're so critical to the election infrastructure in the country, but I didn't mean to leave out, in particular, other members of the intelligence community. There's regular contact there. And I want to make sure I don't overlook our contact with our foreign counterparts, where we're comparing notes there as well. The state election bodies, which of course are an important part of it as well, that happens really more indirectly through DHS and our coordination with DHS. And then, of course, as Congresswoman Handel knows well from her prior life, there are private companies that are an important part of the election infrastructure, and we have some interaction with the private sector as part of this as well.
What gives you the confidence that, we're 11 months away from our next national election, primaries are starting in a couple months ahead? What gives you the confidence that we'll be able to protect our elections next year?
Well, what I can tell you is I'm confident that we're working very hard on the issue. We're going to continue working very hard on the issue. We're going to be continually looking at how we can get even better at working on the issue, but I long ago gave up the idea of making predictions about whether or not we're going to bat 1,000, but that's our goal.
So let me close with the question I asked the Attorney General when he was here. Are you willing to work with the members of this committee? Will you commit to briefing us, whether in public or in classified briefings? And can you give us a point of contact with who we should be communicating with in your department?
I'd be happy to follow up with your staff on that.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rutherford, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, first let me say thank you for coming and appearing before the committee today for quite a while. So thank you very much. Listen, your appearance here is critical to us doing our job and holding the Federal Bureau of Investigations accountable for the people. And I know that's something that you, as the newly appointed director, are also very interested in. And I have to tell you, as one member of Congress, I'm very encouraged by the fact that you are now sitting in that chair. So I want to start with the fact that, as a former law enforcement officer myself, I often thought about and still think about the perceived or actual politicization of law enforcement agencies by the acts of officers within our agencies. And I share my colleagues' concerns regarding the private communications by FBI personnel who were tasked with conducting the Clinton investigation. And certainly those types of biases and other forms of biases go against the ethics of the FBI and other law enforcement agencies if and when they begin to affect the fair and influence the fair enforcement of the law through political consideration. And I know earlier it was mentioned. And so rather than repeat what my colleagues have all gone through, I want to ask the question, what is it, how does the FBI fight against the partisan bias that can naturally exist in agents? We all know that. But specifically, how does the Bureau monitor your agents, and whether that be over social media or other private messaging? Does the FBI have a formal guidance or policy on how this is conducted? Just answer that one first, please.
Well, I think an in-depth answer would require more of a follow-on briefing of some sort. But what I would say is that we try to address the kinds of concerns that you're highlighting, which are important to me, too. I think we share that. Right. We do it through everything from making sure that we recruit the right people, from making sure that we train them in the 21-week training that I described earlier. We make sure that we have policies that remind them about the importance of playing it straight, going by the book, etc.
Are there policies then that specifically address context that they can put out publicly, understanding their First Amendment rights, but also understanding the influence that it can have on the reputation of the agency? And I understand until it begins to affect an investigation, which I think in the case of Special Agent Strzok, it certainly did. I mean, when we're looking at what was previously called the unprecedented actions of not only giving immunity, but not recording potential criminal investigation depositions, That is unprecedented. I think that you would combine the two of those. To give immunity is not unusual. And so if I were to ask you, did anyone lie during the Clinton email deposition, how would you answer that?
I'm not sure what deposition you're referring to, but I would say that questions about the handling of the Clinton email investigation, and in particular whether or not certain decisions made over the life of that investigation were in any way tainted or influenced, as you say, by improper considerations, is something that has been referred to and is very deeply under investigation by the outside independent Inspector General.
Let me ask very quickly, then, because my time's about to run out. So the Inspector General has his investigation going, but does the FBI, do you conduct your own internal investigation as well? I mean, surely it doesn't take an IG investigation to terminate an employee. That's certainly within your purview, correct, as a director?
Well, we have a process. You know, these are career civil servants. We have a process that, and as I said earlier, I prefer to ask questions first and then act later. And in this situation, we would not normally be conducting a parallel internal investigation while the Inspector General is doing his. And the reason for that is because, and this is something that's a best practice across investigations, we want to be sure that we're not doing something that would be viewed as interfering with his.
I understand. My time has expired, sir.
The committee is advised that we have votes on the floor. We have Director Wray, a great appreciation for the 3 hours and 45 minutes you put in so far. But we do have about a half dozen more members that will come back immediately after these votes. So you can get a bite to eat or whatever. I expect to be 35, 40 minutes, and we'll be back again to complete the hearing, and the committee will stand in recess.